The stranger's lips tasted like champagne and reckless decisions, and Natalie Harper couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this alive. She pulled back slightly, her breath forming clouds in the cold December air, and looked into the eyes of the man she'd just kissed. Dark eyes, intense and searching, belonging to a face she'd never seen before tonight. Around them, the rooftop exploded with cheers and confetti, everyone celebrating the arrival of the new year with the same wild abandon that had possessed her moments ago. "Happy New Year," he said, his voice low and warm despite the freezing temperature. "Happy New Year," she echoed, suddenly aware of what she'd just done. She'd kissed a complete stranger at midnight. Not a casual peck either, but a real kiss, the kind that made her toes curl in her heels and her heart race like she'd run up all 23 flights of stairs to this rooftop. The man smiled, and it transformed his whole face from simply handsome to absolutely devastating. Before either of them could say anything else, Natalie's best friend Maya grabbed her arm, pulling her into a group hug with their other friends, all of them laughing and shouting and making promises about how this year would be different, better, transformative. When Natalie looked back toward where the stranger had been standing, he was gone, swallowed up by the crowd of partygoers. She scanned the rooftop, trying to spot him among the sea of faces, but it was impossible. There must have been 200 people up here, all of them dressed in their finest, all of them drunk on possibility and expensive alcohol. "Who was that?" Maya shouted over the music, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I have no idea," Natalie admitted, touching her lips unconsciously. They still tingled from the kiss. "Girl, you just kissed a random man at midnight. That's so unlike you." Maya was right. Natalie was the responsible one, the planner, the friend who always made sure everyone got home safely and never drank too much. She worked as a pediatric physical therapist, spent her weekends volunteering at the children's hospital, and hadn't had a spontaneous moment in the past 3 years since her ex-boyfriend had broken up with her via text message while she was visiting her grandmother in the hospital. But tonight, something had shifted. Maybe it was the champagne she'd been sipping all evening, or the way the city lights sparkled below them like fallen stars, or the fact that this year had been so incredibly hard that she'd decided she deserved one moment of absolute freedom. Whatever it was, when she'd found herself standing next to that stranger at midnight, when he'd looked at her with those dark eyes and asked, "May I?" she'd simply said yes. The party continued around them, but Natalie found herself distracted, her eyes continually searching the crowd. She wanted to find him again, to at least learn his name, but as the minutes ticked by and the temperature continued to drop, people started filtering toward the elevators, heading down to the warmth of the building below. "Let's go," Maya said, shivering in her silver cocktail dress. "I'm freezing and Carlos just texted that there at that bar on 5th Street. Natalie nodded, taking one last look around the rooftop. Nothing. The stranger was gone, and she didn't even know his name. It felt like something out of a movie, except in movies, the prince always found Cinderella. In real life, Natalie thought with a pang of disappointment. Sometimes a kiss was just a kiss, a moment that existed and then disappeared like the fireworks that had lit up the sky at midnight. They took the elevator down, squeezing in with a dozen other people, everyone talking at once about their plans for the rest of the night. Natalie barely heard them. She was thinking about those dark eyes, the way his hand had felt when it cupped her cheek, the smile that had made her knees weak. The next morning, Natalie woke with a mild headache and a vivid memory of the kiss. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, and wondered if she'd ever see him again. New York was a massive city, home to millions of people. The chances of randomly running into one person were astronomical, especially when she didn't even know his name. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Still thinking about Mystery Man, Natalie smiled and typed back. Maybe. We should have gotten his number, or at least his name. I'm the worst wingwoman ever. It's fine. It was just a moment. But it didn't feel fine. It felt like she'd let something important slip through her fingers. The first week of January passed in its usual blur of work and routine. Natalie saw her patients, helped a 7-year-old girl take her first steps after surgery, celebrated a teenage boy's progress with his cerebral palsy treatment, and tried not to think about the stranger from the rooftop. She mostly succeeded during the day when she was busy, but at night, lying in bed, she found herself replaying that kiss over and over, wondering what might have happened if Maya hadn't pulled her away, if she'd stayed to talk to him, to learn his name. On Friday afternoon, Natalie's supervisor called her into the office. Catherine was a woman in her 60s who'd been at the hospital for 30 years and had seen everything. She rarely called anyone into her office unless it was serious. "Sit down, Natalie," Catherine said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Natalie's mind raced through possibilities. Had she done something wrong, missed some paperwork, made an error in someone's treatment plan? "Relax," Catherine said, reading her expression. "You're not in trouble." Quite the opposite, actually. We've had a request for one of our therapists to do some private sessions, and I immediately thought of you. Private sessions? Yes. Apparently, this client had a serious skiing accident over the holidays, torn ligaments, fractured bones, the works. He's had surgery and needs intensive physical therapy, but his schedule doesn't allow him to come into the hospital regularly. He's willing to pay premium rates for someone to come to his home for daily sessions. Natalie hesitated. She'd never done private home sessions before. "Why me?" "Because you're my best therapist, and this client specifically requested someone with experience in sports-related injuries and post-surgical rehabilitation. That's your specialty. Plus, honestly, the money is excellent, and I know you've been picking up extra shifts. This could really help with your student loans." That was true. Natalie was still paying off her graduate degree, and the debt hung over her like a dark cloud. The idea of making a significant dent in it was tempting. "Who's the client?" Catherine glanced at her computer screen. "His name is Ethan Kingsley. I don't know much about him except that his assistant was very professional and very insistent that we provide the best therapist available." The name meant nothing to Natalie. "When would I start?" "Monday, if you're interested." The sessions would be every day for at least a month, possibly longer depending on his progress. 2 hours each day, and the rate is triple what you make here for the same time. Triple. Natalie's mind quickly calculated what that would mean for her finances. She could pay off a huge chunk of her loans, maybe even save enough to finally take that trip to see her sister in California. "I'll do it," she said. Catherine smiled. "Good. I'll send you all the details and his medical records this afternoon. His address is on the Upper East Side, so not too far from your apartment." That evening, Natalie reviewed Ethan Kingsley's medical file. The skiing accident had happened in Aspen on December 28th. He'd been airlifted to a hospital there, had emergency surgery, and then had been transported back to New York for follow-up care. The injuries were serious but not life-threatening. With proper therapy, he should make a full recovery, though it would take months of dedicated work. She looked at the address Catherine had provided and whistled low. The Upper East Side was expensive, but this particular building was in one of the most exclusive areas. Whoever Ethan Kingsley was, he had serious money. Maya came over that night with Thai food and wine, their standing Friday tradition. "So you're going to be a private therapist for some rich guy?" Maya asked, twirling noodles around her fork. "That sounds like the beginning of a romance novel." "It's just a job," Natalie said, laughing. "A really well-paying job. Is he cute? Please tell me you at least Googled him." "I don't know what he looks like, I just have his medical records." Maya grabbed her phone. "What's his name?" "Ethan Kingsley." Maya typed rapidly, her eyes widening as she stared at the screen. "Natalie." "Oh my God, Natalie." "What?" Maya turned her phone around, showing Natalie a Forbes article. The headline read, "Ethan Kingsley, 32, named youngest CEO of major hospitality corporation." The photo showed a man in an expensive suit, standing in front of a massive building, looking every inch the powerful executive. But it was his face that made Natalie's heart stop. Dark eyes, strong jaw, that same devastating smile. "That's him," she whispered. "Who?" "The stranger from the rooftop. That's the man I kissed at midnight." Maya's jaw dropped. "You're kidding." "I'm not. I swear that's him. I'd recognize those eyes anywhere." They both stared at the photo. According to the article, Ethan Kingsley had taken over as CEO of Kingsley Hospitality Group 18 months ago after his father had retired. The company owned luxury hotels, restaurants, and event spaces across the country and internationally. He was worth, according to Forbes estimates, somewhere in the vicinity of $800 million. "You kissed a billionaire," Maya said, her voice awed. "And now you're going to be his physical therapist. This is absolutely insane." Natalie's mind was reeling. What were the odds? In a city of millions, she'd somehow kissed a man on New Year's Eve and was now going to spend the next month helping him recover from an injury. It felt like fate, or coincidence, or some strange combination of both. "You think he'll remember me?" she asked. "Girl, if a kiss like that happened to me, I'd remember. But you should probably keep it professional, right? I mean, he's technically going to be your client." Maya was right, but Natalie couldn't deny the flutter of excitement in her stomach. She was going to see him again. The stranger from the rooftop had a name, a face, a whole life, and in 3 days she'd be walking into his home. Monday morning arrived with a fresh snowfall that blanketed the city in white. Natalie dressed carefully, choosing professional clothes that were still comfortable enough to move in. She packed her therapy bag with all the equipment she might need, checked the address 3 more times, and took the subway to the Upper East Side. The building was even more impressive in person. A doorman greeted her, checked her name against a list, and directed her to the private elevator that went directly to the penthouse. Her heart pounded as the elevator climbed, and she took deep breaths to calm herself. The doors opened directly into a massive foyer. Natalie stepped out, her eyes widening at the sight before her. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park, the morning light streaming in and illuminating the space. The decor was modern but warm, expensive without being ostentatious. "Miss Harper." A woman in her 40s approached, dressed in business casual attire. "I'm Jennifer, Mr. Kingsley's executive assistant. Thank you for coming." "Of course," Natalie said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Mr. Kingsley is in the living room. He's been doing his morning exercises, though I'm sure you'll want to assess his current condition yourself." Jennifer led her through the apartment, which seemed to go on forever. "He can be a bit stubborn about following doctor's orders. He's been trying to work from home, but between the pain medication and the injury, it's been challenging." They entered a massive living room where Ethan Kingsley sat on a leather couch, his right leg elevated on an ottoman, a laptop balanced on his knees. He looked up as they entered, and Natalie watched recognition flash across his face, followed by surprise. "You," he said. "Hello," Natalie managed, her professional demeanor slipping for just a moment. Up close in the daylight, he was even more attractive than she remembered. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and he had a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw, but those eyes were exactly as she'd remembered them. "You two know each other?" Jennifer asked, looking between them. "We met briefly on New Year's Eve," Ethan said, his gaze never leaving Natalie's face. "I didn't catch your name." "Natalie Harper. I'm your physical therapist." A slow smile spread across his face. "This is unexpected." Jennifer looked confused but clearly decided not to pursue it. "I'll leave you to get started. Mr. Kingsley, please actually listen to Miss Harper. Your doctor was very clear about the importance of physical therapy." "I'll behave," Ethan said, though his eyes were still fixed on Natalie. Jennifer left, and suddenly they were alone. Natalie set down her bag and pulled out her tablet with his medical information. "So," Ethan said, "the woman who kissed me at midnight is now my physical therapist. Should I be concerned that you're secretly following me?" Natalie felt her cheeks heat. "I could ask you the same thing. Did you request me specifically?" "I requested the best therapist available. I had no idea it would be you. Though I have to admit, I've been thinking about that kiss for the past 2 weeks." "We should probably keep this professional," Natalie said, though her heart was racing. "You're my client and I take my work very seriously." "Of course," Ethan said, his expression shifting to something more guarded. "You're right, I apologize." Natalie felt a pang of disappointment, but she pushed it aside. She was here to do a job. "Let's talk about your injury. According to your medical records, you had surgery to repair torn ligaments in your knee and you fractured your tibia. How's your pain level today?" For the next hour, Natalie conducted a thorough assessment. She examined his range of motion, tested his strength, and asked detailed questions about his pain and mobility. Ethan was a good patient, answering her questions honestly and following her instructions, though she could tell he was frustrated by his limitations. "You're further along than I expected," she said finally, "but you've been pushing yourself too hard. These stress fractures here," she pointed to his X-rays on her tablet, "are from you putting weight on the leg before it was ready." "I have a company to run," Ethan said. "I can't just lie in bed for months. You can work from the couch, which is what you should be doing. If you keep pushing too hard, you're going to set back your recovery by weeks or even months. Is that what you want?" He met her gaze, and she saw frustration there, but also something else. "Respect, maybe." "No. Good. Then we're going to start with some gentle exercises and I'm going to teach you exactly what you should and shouldn't be doing. But you have to promise me you'll actually follow the plan. You drive a hard bargain." "I'm good at my job," Natalie said firmly. "And part of my job is making sure stubborn CEOs don't ruin their own recovery." Ethan laughed, and the sound filled the room, warm and genuine. "Okay, I promise. I'll be a model patient." They worked through a series of exercises, with Natalie guiding him carefully through each movement. She was acutely aware of every time she touched him, adjusting his position or supporting his leg. There was an electric quality to each contact, a charge that seemed to run between them. By the end of the 2-hour session, Ethan looked tired but in a good way. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes. And remember, ice for 20 minutes every few hours. Keep the leg elevated when you're sitting and don't try to do anything without the crutches." "Yes, madam." Natalie packed up her equipment, aware that Ethan was watching her. At the door, she turned back. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "After the kiss on New Year's Eve, why did you disappear?" Ethan's expression grew serious. "I didn't disappear. I turned around to tell my assistant I was leaving early, and when I looked back, you were gone. I spent the next hour searching that entire rooftop for you." I even asked the event organizers if they had a guest list, but it was a friend's party and half the people there were plus ones. I didn't even know your name. Natalie's breath caught. I looked for you too. I guess we were searching at the same time and kept missing each other, Ethan said softly. I'm glad you're here now, though, even if we have to keep things professional. Natalie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She left the apartment with her mind whirling. He'd looked for her. He'd spent an hour trying to find her. The kiss had meant something to him too. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Every morning, Natalie would arrive at Ethan's penthouse and put him through his therapy routine. They kept things professional, discussing only his recovery and her treatment plan, but there was an undercurrent to everything, a tension that seemed to build with each passing day. Ethan was a dedicated patient. He followed her instructions exactly, never complained about the pain, and worked harder than anyone she'd ever treated. She could see the improvement in his mobility and strength, could track his progress in concrete ways. But she could also see his frustration with the slow pace of recovery, the way he wanted to push harder and faster than his body was ready for. "Tell me about your work," he said one morning during a break between exercises. They were 3 weeks into the treatment and he could now stand with minimal support. "What do you want to know? Why physical therapy? Why kids specifically?" Natalie settled into a chair across from him. "When I was 8, my little brother got hit by a car. He was in the hospital for months, and the doctors said he might never walk again. But he had this amazing physical therapist who worked with him every single day, who believed in him when nobody else did. 2 years later, he ran a 5K. I watched her give him his life back, and I knew that's what I wanted to do." "That's incredible," Ethan said. "How's your brother now?" "He's great. He's a teacher in California, married with twin girls who are absolute terrors in the best way. You must be a great aunt." "I try to be. I don't see them as much as I'd like. Flights are expensive and my schedule is always packed." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. "What if money wasn't an issue? Where would you go?" Natalie laughed. "Everywhere. I'd visit my brother more. I'd take my parents on a vacation. They've never left the East Coast. I'd go to Italy and eat real pasta and drink wine in Tuscany. I'd see the northern lights in Iceland. I'd go everywhere." "You should," Ethan said simply. "Maybe someday. For now, I'm happy with what I have." But she wasn't, not really. She was content, which wasn't the same thing. She loved her work, loved her small apartment and her friendship with Maya and her routine, but there was a part of her that wanted more. Wanted adventure and spontaneity and the kind of life where you could kiss strangers at midnight without it being completely out of character. After 4 weeks, Ethan could walk without crutches for short distances. Natalie was impressed with his progress, and she told him so. "I have a good teacher," he said. They were standing by the windows, looking out at the park. It had started snowing again, fat flakes drifting down and coating the trees in white. "You've worked really hard," Natalie said. "A lot of patients don't take their recovery this seriously." "I had motivation," Ethan said. He turned to look at her. "Can I take you to dinner?" Natalie's heart skipped. "Ethan, I know professional boundaries, but you're not going to be my therapist forever. In another few weeks, I'll be cleared to go back to regular physical therapy at the hospital. And then we'd just be 2 people who kissed at midnight and can't stop thinking about each other." "You think about me?" Natalie asked softly. "All the time. Every single day. I think about that kiss, about the way you looked under the stars with the city lights behind you. I think about the way you laugh when I make a terrible joke during our sessions, and the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating on my exercises. I think about you constantly, Natalie, and it's driving me crazy." Natalie felt like she couldn't breathe. "I think about you too." "Then have dinner with me." Not tonight, not while I'm still technically your patient, but soon, please. She knew she should say no. There were a dozen reasons why this was a bad idea. He was a billionaire CEO, and she was a physical therapist still paying off student loans. They lived in completely different worlds. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same person she'd kissed on New Year's Eve, the one who'd looked at her like she was the only person in the world. "Okay," she said. "When you're cleared by your doctor, we can have dinner." Ethan's smile was brilliant. "It's a date." The next 2 weeks were torture in the best possible way. Every session was charged with anticipation, with the knowledge that soon, very soon, they could stop pretending there wasn't something real between them. Ethan's recovery progressed rapidly, and Natalie couldn't tell if it was because he was healing well or because he was motivated by the promise of that dinner. His doctor's appointment was on a Friday. Natalie went with him, at his request, to provide a report on his progress. The doctor was pleased, declaring that Ethan could return to normal activities with some restrictions and should continue with regular physical therapy twice a week at the hospital. "You're officially no longer my patient," Natalie said as they left the doctor's office. "Good," Ethan said. He turned to her right there in the hospital hallway. "Are you free tomorrow night?" "I am. I'll pick you up at 7, wear something nice." "How nice are we talking?" "Very nice. I'm taking you somewhere special." Natalie called Maya the moment she got home. "I need help. I have a date with Ethan tomorrow night, and he said to wear something very nice, and I don't know what that means." "Does that mean cocktail dress? Evening gown? What do billionaires consider very nice?" Maya arrived an hour later with an armful of dresses. They spent the evening trying on different options, debating shoes and jewelry, until finally settling on a deep blue dress that hugged Natalie's curves and made her eyes look impossibly bright. "You look like a movie star," Maya said approvingly. "He's going to lose his mind when he sees you." Saturday felt like the longest day of Natalie's life. She got her hair done, her nails done, spent far too long on her makeup. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around, her nerves were stretched thin. The intercom buzzed exactly at 7. "Miss Harper, you have a visitor," the doorman said. "I'll be right down." Natalie grabbed her clutch, took one last look in the mirror and headed downstairs. Ethan was waiting in the lobby, and when he saw her, his expression made every minute of preparation worth it. "Natalie," he said, his voice rough, "you look absolutely stunning. You clean up pretty well yourself." He was wearing a tailored black suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he looked every inch the billionaire CEO. But when he smiled at her, she saw the same man who'd kissed her at midnight, who'd worked so hard during his recovery, who'd looked at her like she was precious. A car was waiting outside, a sleek black town car with a driver. Ethan helped her in, his hand warm on her lower back, and slid in beside her. "Where are we going?" Natalie asked. "It's a surprise." They drove through the city as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ethan asked her about her week, about her other patients, and Natalie found herself relaxing into the conversation. This was easy, natural, like talking to someone she'd known for years rather than weeks. The car pulled up in front of a building Natalie recognized. "Is this one of your hotels?" "It is. The flagship property. I thought we'd have dinner at the restaurant on the top floor. It's usually booked months in advance, but I happen to know the owner." The restaurant was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered 360-degree views of the city, and the decor was elegant without being stuffy. But what caught Natalie's attention was that they seemed to be the only people there. "Did you rent out the entire restaurant?" she asked as a waiter led them to a table by the window. "I wanted privacy," Ethan said. "I've been thinking about this dinner for weeks, and I didn't want to share you with anyone. Over the course of the meal, which consisted of dish after perfectly prepared dish, they talked about everything. Ethan told her about growing up in a family business, about the pressure to succeed, and the loneliness that came with wealth. Natalie shared stories about her childhood, about her family, about the patients who touched her heart over the years. "I looked for you," Ethan said suddenly over dessert. "After New Year's Eve, I even hired a private investigator." Natalie's eyes widened. "You did what?" "I know it sounds crazy, but that kiss, Natalie, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I've been with other women, had relationships, but nothing ever felt like that moment on the rooftop. I needed to find you." "Why didn't the investigator find me?" he tried. But without a name, and with how crowded that party was, there just wasn't enough to go on. "And then suddenly, you walked into my apartment and it felt like fate." "Do you believe in fate?" Natalie asked. "I didn't used to. I'm a businessman. I believe in strategy and hard work and calculated risks. But meeting you twice in a city of millions, that feels like more than coincidence." After dinner, they went up to the rooftop of the hotel. It was different from the party rooftop, more intimate, with a garden and small seating areas designed for privacy. The city sprawled out below them, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. "I used to come up here when I was younger," Ethan said. "Whenever the pressure got to be too much, there's something about being up high, looking down at everything that makes problems feel smaller." "What kind of pressure?" Natalie asked, moving closer to him. "The pressure to be perfect. To live up to my father's legacy. To prove I deserved to run the company and wasn't just getting it because of my last name. I've worked my entire life to prove myself, and sometimes I wonder what I've sacrificed along the way." "Like what?" "Connection. Real relationships. I have plenty of business associates, people who want something from me, women who are interested in my bank account. But I don't have many people who really see me for who I am." Natalie reached out and took his hand. "I see you." Ethan turned to her, and the intensity in his eyes took her breath away. "That's why this scares me. You met me before you knew who I was, before you knew about the money or the company. That kiss on New Year's Eve was just two people connecting, nothing else. And these past weeks, working with you, I've felt more like myself than I have in years." "I'm scared too," Natalie admitted. "Your world is so different from mine. Sometimes I wonder what I'm doing here, if this can actually work." "We make it work," Ethan said firmly. He pulled her closer. "I don't care about the differences. I care about this about us." He kissed her then, and it was even better than New Year's Eve. This time there was no champagne haze, no excuse of midnight madness. This was deliberate and real, a kiss that promised things Natalie had been afraid to hope for. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you, Natalie. I think I started falling that night on the rooftop, and I haven't stopped." "I'm falling for you too," she whispered. The next few months were like a dream. Ethan courted her properly, with dates and flowers and thoughtful gestures that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with knowing her. He sent her first editions of her favorite books, arranged for her to visit her brother in California for a weekend, supported her work at the hospital in ways both big and small. Natalie introduced him to Maya, who gave him a thorough grilling before declaring him acceptable. She brought him to her small apartment, nervous about what he'd think of her modest lifestyle. But Ethan had looked around with genuine interest, and told her it felt like a home in a way his penthouse never had. They spent evenings cooking together in her tiny kitchen, watching movies on her second-hand couch, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. Ethan showed her his world too, taking her to charity galas and business dinners, but she could tell he preferred the quiet moments, just the two of them. "I love you," Ethan said one night in April. They were back on his rooftop, looking at the stars. It was warm now, spring having finally arrived, and the city felt full of possibility. "I love you too," Natalie said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. But as spring turned to summer, cracks started to appear, not in their relationship, but in the reality of their different worlds. Ethan's work demanded more and more of his time. He traveled constantly, flying to different cities to check on properties and meet with investors. Natalie's schedule was equally packed, her patient load heavy, her hours long. They went days without seeing each other, communicating only through texts and brief phone calls. When they did manage to meet, they were both exhausted, running on fumes. Natalie could see the strain in Ethan's face, the way the pressure of his position wore on him. "Come with me," Ethan said one night in late July. He just returned from a week in Los Angeles, and they were having dinner at his penthouse. "To Singapore. I have meetings there next week, but we could make a vacation out of it. You could finally see another country." "I can't just take off work for a week," Natalie said, though the offer was tempting. "I have patients who depend on me. They could find someone else to cover." "It's not that simple, Ethan. These kids need consistency. I can't just disappear." "You never take time off," Ethan said, frustration creeping into his voice. "When was the last time you did something for yourself?" "I do things for myself all the time." "Like what?" "Working 60 hours a week. Living in a cramped apartment because you're putting every spare dollar towards student loans." "Natalie, you're so busy taking care of everyone else that you never stop to think about what you want." The words stung, partly because they were true. Not everyone has the luxury of flying around the world whenever they want. Some of us have responsibilities. And you think I don't? I have thousands of employees depending on me, millions of dollars at stake with every decision I make. But I also know that life is more than just work. They stared at each other, the tension thick between them. Finally, Ethan sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, I'm just tired and I miss you." "I miss you too," Natalie said softly, "but I can't drop everything for a last-minute trip. That's not who I am." Ethan nodded, but she could see the disappointment in his eyes. That night, Natalie went home to her apartment feeling unsettled. Was he right? Was she so focused on responsibility that she was missing out on life? A week later, while Ethan was in Singapore, Natalie's supervisor called her in for another meeting. "I have a proposition for you," Catherine said. "The hospital is opening a new pediatric therapy center, and we want you to head it up. It would mean a significant raise, more control over your schedule, and the opportunity to build a program from the ground up." "That sounds amazing," Natalie said, her heart lifting. "There's one catch. The center is going to be in Boston. You'd have to relocate." "Boston?" "Across the state, hours away from New York, away from Ethan." "Can I think about it?" Natalie asked. "Of course. But I need an answer by the end of the month. This is a huge opportunity, Natalie. It's the kind of position that could define your career." Natalie spent the next few days in turmoil. This was her dream job, the exact kind of work she'd always wanted to do. But it would mean leaving New York, leaving Ethan. Could their relationship survive long distance? They were already struggling with his travel schedule. How would it work if they were in different cities permanently? When Ethan returned from Singapore, she told him about the offer. They were at her apartment, and she watched his face carefully as she explained the opportunity. "That's incredible, Natalie," he said, and she could hear the genuine pride in his voice. "You'd be amazing at that." "But it's in Boston." "I know." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Would you consider not taking it? Would you consider moving to Boston?" Natalie countered. "My company is here. The headquarters, all of our major operations. I can't just relocate." And I can't just pass up the opportunity of a lifetime." They looked at each other, and Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. This was it, the impossible situation she'd been afraid of from the beginning. Their worlds were too different, their lives pulling them in opposite directions. "I don't want to lose you," Ethan said, his voice rough. "I don't want to lose you either. But I can't ask you to give up everything for me, and I don't think you should ask me to do the same." "So what do we do?" Natalie took a shaky breath. "I think we need to be realistic about this. We've been trying to make it work, but maybe we're just too different. Maybe that kiss on New Year's Eve was just meant to be a beautiful moment, not a whole relationship." "I don't believe that," Ethan said fiercely. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I love you, Natalie. I don't care about the obstacles, we'll figure it out." "How? You can't give up your company and I can't pass up this opportunity. There's no compromise here." "Then we do long distance. Lots of couples make it work. For how long? A year, 2, 5, and then what?" "One of us has to give up everything we've worked for." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So you're just giving up. You're not even willing to try." "I'm trying to be realistic." "You're trying to protect yourself," Ethan said. "You're scared, so you're pushing me away before I can hurt you." The words hit too close to home. Natalie pulled her hands from his. "Maybe you should go." Ethan stood, his expression a mix of hurt and anger. "If that's what you want." "It is." He left, and Natalie collapsed on her couch, tears streaming down her face. Meyer arrived an hour later, summoned by a frantic text, and held her while she cried. "Did I just make the biggest mistake of my life?" Natalie asked. "I don't know," Maya said honestly. "But I do know you can't sacrifice your dreams for anyone, even someone you love." Natalie accepted the position in Boston. She gave her notice at the hospital, started packing up her apartment, and tried very hard not to think about Ethan. She didn't call him, and he didn't call her. It was over, clean and final, or so she told herself. The weeks passed in a blur of activity. Natalie found an apartment in Boston, started learning about her new role, prepared to leave behind the life she'd built in New York. On her last day at the hospital, her colleagues threw her a party. Children she'd worked with made her cards and drawings. It was bittersweet, leaving people she cared about, but also exciting to start fresh. Maya helped her pack up the last of her things. "Have you heard from him?" "No, and I won't. It's better this way." "Is it? Because you've been miserable for the past month." "I'll get over it, eventually." But Natalie wasn't sure that was true. She thought about Ethan constantly, wondered what he was doing, whether he thought about her too. Some nights, she'd pull up pictures from their time together on her phone, torturing herself with memories of when things were good. Moving day arrived. Natalie loaded her belongings into a rental truck, said goodbye to her apartment, and prepared to drive to Boston. Maya hugged her fiercely at the curb. "Call me the second you get there. And Nat, don't close yourself off completely. You deserve to be happy." Natalie nodded, not trusting her voice, and climbed into the truck. She was about to pull away when a familiar black town car pulled up behind her. Her heart stopped as Ethan got out. He looked tired, thinner than she remembered, but still devastatingly handsome in jeans and a casual shirt. He walked up to her window, and Natalie rolled it down with shaking hands. "Hi," he said, "hi." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I heard you were leaving today. I had to see you before you left." "Ethan, we already said goodbye." "No, we said things we didn't mean because we were both hurt and scared. But I'm not letting you drive away without telling you the truth." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Natalie. I love your dedication to your work and the way you care about people. I love that you're willing to follow your dreams even when it's hard. And I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to choose between your career and us." Tears were streaming down Natalie's face now. "I love you too, but nothing's changed. We're still in an impossible situation." Actually, that's why I'm here. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks, and I realized something. My company has been talking about expanding to New England for years, opening new properties in Boston, Cape Cod, Vermont. I've been putting it off because it would mean spending more time away from New York, but the truth is, New York doesn't feel like home anymore. Not without you. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm opening a new regional office in Boston, and I'm going to be splitting my time between there and New York. It won't be perfect. I'll still have to travel, and there will be times when my schedule is crazy. But I can be with you, really be with you, if you'll give me another chance. Natalie couldn't breathe. You're moving to Boston, part-time at least, and honestly it makes good business sense. We should have expanded to New England years ago. You just gave me the push I needed to finally do it. You can't uproot your whole life for me. I'm not. I'm choosing to build a life with you. There's a difference. Ethan reached through the window and cupped her face. I don't want to look back in 20 years and regret letting you go because I was too stubborn to compromise. You're worth more than that. We're worth more than that. I'm scared, Natalie admitted. What if we try and it still doesn't work? Then at least we'll know we gave it our all, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to figure this out together one day at a time. Natalie kissed him then, leaning out the truck window, not caring that they were blocking traffic or that Maya was whooping behind them. Ethan kissed her back like he'd been starving for it, like she was air and he'd been drowning. I love you, she said against his lips. I love you so much. I love you too. Now, are you going to let me follow you to Boston and help you unpack? Natalie laughed through her tears. Yeah, I am. The move to Boston was chaotic but perfect. Ethan helped her set up her new apartment, though he quickly started talking about them finding a place together. He threw himself into the New England expansion with the same dedication he brought to everything, scouting locations, and meeting with investors. Within 3 months, he'd opened a regional office and was spending 3 days a week in Boston. Natalie thrived in her new role. Building the therapy center from the ground up was challenging but rewarding, and she loved having more control over her schedule and treatment approaches. She and Ethan found a rhythm, coordinating their calendars and making the most of the time they had together. On weekends, they explored their new city. They walked the Freedom Trail, ate in the North End, went to Red Sox games. They visited her brother in California for Thanksgiving, and Ethan charmed her entire family. For Christmas, they flew to Aspen, and Natalie watched nervously as Ethan strapped on skis for the first time since his accident. Are you sure about this? She asked. I'm sure. Besides, I have the best physical therapist in the world. If I hurt myself, I know you'll fix me up. They skied gentle slopes, nothing like the challenging run where he'd gotten hurt the year before. That night, sitting by the fire in their lodge, Ethan pulled out a small velvet box. Natalie Harper, he said, dropping to one knee. A year ago, I kissed you on a rooftop at midnight and my whole world changed. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible. You've shown me that there's more to life than work and success. You've given me a home, not just a place but a feeling. Will you marry me? The ring was beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, but Natalie barely looked at it. She was too busy looking at Ethan, at the man she loved more than anything. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Ethan slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her deeply. I'm the luckiest man alive. They got married the following New Year's Eve, not on a rooftop this time, but in a beautiful ballroom in one of Ethan's hotels, surrounded by friends and family. Maya was the maid of honor, and Ethan's younger sister stood as a bridesmaid. Natalie's brother walked her down the aisle, and she'd never seen her parents so happy. At midnight, as fireworks exploded over the city, Ethan and Natalie stood in front of a window, watching the celebration. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and she leaned back into his embrace. "You remember last year?" she asked. "When we kissed on that rooftop?" "I remember everything about that night. The way you looked with snow in your hair. The way you tasted like champagne and possibility. The way I knew even then that you were going to change my life. I never believed in love at first sight before that night. And now I know it's real, because I loved you from that first moment, even when I didn't know your name." Ethan turned her in his arms and kissed her as the clock struck midnight, just like a year ago. But this time, there was no question about whether they'd see each other again. This time, they had forever. The years that followed were full and rich. Natalie's therapy center became a model program, and she published research papers that changed how pediatric physical therapy was approached nationwide. Ethan continued to grow his company, but he also learned to delegate more, to trust his team, to make space for life outside of work. They bought a house in a Boston suburb with a big backyard and room to grow. On their second anniversary, Natalie told Ethan she was pregnant, and she'd never seen him cry before, but he did then, tears of pure joy streaming down his face. Their daughter was born the following September, a healthy baby girl with Ethan's dark hair and Natalie's smile. They named her Alina, and she was the light of both their lives. Ethan cut back his travel even more, determined not to miss a moment of his daughter's childhood. Natalie reduced her hours at the center, wanting to be present for all the milestones. When Alina was 2, they had a son, Marcus, who had his mother's determination and his father's charm. The house filled with noise and laughter, with toys scattered across the floor and fingerprints on the windows. It was chaos and mess, and absolutely perfect. On New Year's Eve, when Alina was 5 and Marcus was 3, they hosted a small party at their home. Just close friends and family. Nothing like the massive rooftop party where everything had started. The kids stayed up past their bedtime, hyped up on sparkling cider and excitement. At midnight, Natalie and Ethan stepped out onto their back porch, watching fireworks light up the sky in the distance. The house behind them was full of people they loved, their children's laughter drifting out through the windows. "Can you believe it's been 7 years since we met?" Natalie asked, snuggling into Ethan's warmth. "7 years since I kissed a beautiful stranger and fell completely in love," Ethan said. He looked down at her, his eyes soft. "If you could go back and tell yourself what was coming, would you?" Natalie thought about it. About all the obstacles they'd faced, the moments of doubt, the compromises and adjustments, about the joy that had come from working through all of it together. "No," she said finally. "I think part of what made it special was not knowing, taking that leap of faith. Choosing love even when it was scary." "I'd do it all again," Ethan said. "Every single moment exactly the same, because it led me here to you, to this life we've built." They kissed as the fireworks reached their crescendo, a kiss that tasted like champagne and promises kept. Inside, their children called for them, and they turned back toward the warmth and light of their home, their hands clasped together. That kiss on a rooftop 7 years ago had changed everything. Natalie had been looking for one perfect moment, one night of freedom and spontaneity. She'd found a lifetime instead, found a love that was real and deep and worth every challenge they'd faced. As they walked back inside, Alina grabbed Natalie's hand and Marcus climbed into Ethan's arms. Their friends raised glasses in a toast to the new year, to fresh starts and new possibilities. But for Natalie and Ethan, the best beginning had already happened, years ago when a stranger had asked, "May I?" And she'd said yes. They'd built something extraordinary from that one kiss, a family and a life that exceeded every dream Natalie had ever dared to have. The stranger from the rooftop had become her husband, her partner, her home. And every single day, she was grateful for the courage it had taken to kiss him at midnight, to fall in love with him, to choose him over and over again. The house filled with laughter again as someone told a joke and the kids shrieked with delight. Ethan met Natalie's eyes across the room and winked, that same devastating smile on his face. She smiled back, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was their happily ever after. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and true and theirs. And it had all started with one kiss, one perfect moment under the stars when two strangers found each other in a city of millions and decided to hold on tight. Years later, when their children were older and asked how they'd met, Natalie and Ethan would tell the story together. About the rooftop party and the midnight kiss. About searching for each other and finding each other again. About choosing love even when it was complicated. Alina and Marcus would groan and say it was too romantic, too much like a fairy tale. But they'd also see the way their parents looked at each other, the gentle touches and inside jokes, the partnership that had been forged through compromise and dedication. They'd grow up knowing what real love looked like, and they'd carry that knowledge with them into their own lives. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan took Natalie back to that original rooftop where they'd first kissed. He'd rented it out for the evening, recreating the party as much as possible. String lights hung overhead, champagne flowed freely, and as midnight approached, they stood in the exact spot where everything had begun. 10 years, Natalie said wonderingly. It feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time. Best decision I ever made, Ethan said. Asking if I could kiss you. Best answer I ever gave. They kissed at midnight again, and it was just as electric as it had been a decade ago. The city sparkled around them, full of possibility and promise. Somewhere out there, Natalie thought, there were other people having their own midnight moments, their own unexpected beginnings. She hoped they'd be brave enough to follow where those moments led, because love, real love, was worth the risk. It was worth the fear and the compromise and the hard work. It was worth everything. Ethan pulled back and rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For saying yes. 10 years ago, last week when I asked you to come here tonight and every day in between. For choosing us, choosing this life. Always," Natalie promised. "I'll always choose us." They stayed on the rooftop for hours, talking and laughing and remembering. When they finally went home, it was to the house full of love they'd built together, to the children sleeping peacefully in their beds, to the life that had blossomed from one perfect kiss. Natalie had spent so many years being practical and responsible, planning every detail and avoiding risk. But the best thing she'd ever done was embrace one moment of spontaneity, one leap of faith. That kiss at midnight had been the beginning of everything. And as she fell asleep that night, Ethan's arms around her, she sent up a silent thank you to whatever force had brought them together. To fate or chance or simple dumb luck. Because whether it was meant to be or just a beautiful accident, she'd found her person, her home, her forever. The stranger from the rooftop had become her entire world, and she wouldn't change a single thing.